Hey guys, welcome back to Endless Money Pits. This is my Jeep, and somebody asked me to make a video about it a long time ago, so I thought I'd finally do it. It's a 1998 Jeep Grand Cherokee, which makes it a ZJ, and it's got the limited package with the 249 transfer case that has full-time four-wheel drive. I bought it 9 years ago, and I've only put 30,000 miles on it because it's not my daily driver, but I've put a truly surprising amount of money into upgrading and maintaining this thing over the years. The original reason I bought this thing was because I was moving to Klamath Falls for college, and it snows a lot there, so I needed something with four-wheel drive. This was the cheapest four-wheel drive SUV I could find. I got it for $1,600 from a really sketchy guy that I actually called the police on because I swore he was trying to scam me. There was a trip permit in the back that was bleached out, and it was from a different car. There was license plates on it that were not registered to any vehicle. That's what the police said. And I gave him my motorcycle as collateral before I knew all this because I didn't have all the money up front. So when I get the Jeep home, I'm going through it, I go through the glove box, and I find all these records from like 5 other people who have had this Jeep and done maintenance on it, but never registered it and only owned it for a very short period of time. The whole thing is totally sketchy. Meanwhile, he was out of town. I think he was in Mexico actually for like 2 weeks. I didn't know that. So I sat outside his house waiting for him because he wouldn't answer my phone calls, and I was really worried he was trying to rip me off. So of course, after I purchase it, I checked the Carfax on it, and it says it has a salvage title. He sold it to me as a clear title vehicle, so I panicked even more. Eventually, he came home and he explained to me that although he was doing some shady things with the license plate and the trip permit, the Jeep actually did have a clear title, and he gave me an honest sale. Of course, I didn't believe the guy, and I chewed him out, and I threatened to call the police on him again, and eventually he just said, look, I'll knock another $300 off the Jeep, so it was down to $1,300, and you can come get your motorcycle whenever you want. And I said, okay, fine, I'll deal with the salvage title thing. That's a good enough deal, and I've driven the thing. It seems like it's gonna work for me, so I'll just deal with it. So I go the next day, I think, to pick up my motorcycle. I take a friend. When I get there, I take a photo of this guy's driver's license because I don't trust him at all. He takes a photo of mine, but I don't care. And then my friend rides my motorcycle home for me, and everything seems okay. Also, he had never registered the vehicle in his own name. The title still had the name of the owner before him on it, and he gave me a handwritten letter from that guy saying that he was selling it to this guy. So it was supposed to be okay for me to buy it, and I looked it up, and legally it was supposed to be okay. So I went through with it. So I registered the Jeep, and after a couple of weeks I got the title, and it wasn't salvaged. It was just the Carfax that said it was salvaged. So I contacted Carfax and I said, hey, what's up with this? You say that my Jeep is salvaged, but the state of Oregon says it's not. Carfax got back to me and they said that they messed up. Their records were wrong. This Jeep is not salvaged. That was a huge relief. So now I've got a $1,300 Jeep Grand Cherokee Limited. It's got the 5.2 liter V8. It runs great. The four-wheel drive works. It's everything I wanted for $1,300. But I paid in stress. That was by far the most stressful 2 weeks of my life, and I learned a lot from it. So I hope you do too. That's why I told the story. Anyway, about the Jeep, I'll start by going over all the mods I've done to it over the last 9 years in chronological order, and then I'll tell you about all the maintenance I've had to do to it, and at the end I'll tell you about the current issues it still has. This is gonna be one long fun story about Jeep ownership, so let's get to it. I'll also try to put links in the description for anything that I can. Of course, the first modification I had to do was get a steering wheel cover. As you can see, it says Jeep on here. I got it at Walmart, but the first steering wheel cover I had on here was a different one from Walmart. It was like a squishy one that I thought would be warmer for the winter time, but it just got dirty really fast because it was kind of fuzzy. The next thing I did was less of a modification, but it was driving me nuts not having the keyless entry working. I went on eBay and I found 2 of these guys for like 10 bucks a piece, and then I took them to the local dealership and asked them to program them for me. The guy at the counter was a total jerk and said it wasn't gonna work and was trying to make me feel stupid. But I sat there and waited for an hour for somebody to program the dumb thing, and when it came back, it worked. Because I was a college student, I didn't have any money to do more modifications until about a year later when I got an internship working for PG&E in Sacramento. I worked for them for 2 months as a land surveyor technician and saved up about $10,000. I was planning to sell the Jeep and use all that money to buy something else. I was looking at BMW X5s and Toyota Land Cruisers, but it just didn't make sense to me to spend all that money for a stock vehicle. I realized, hey, I could just spend all that money upgrading this vehicle. And maybe that wasn't the most financially wise decision, but I'm still really happy with that decision. I've learned a hell of a lot by working on this Jeep, and now I actually have a pretty reliable vehicle that I know from top to bottom. Anyway, the first modification I did was installing a 3.5-inch lift from Iron Rock Off-Road. I bought it through this guy that everybody used to recommend through the Jeep forum. I can't remember his name offhand, but I'll look it up and put it on the screen. I don't know if he's still around, but I bet he is. I actually bought a lot of parts from him over the years, but it's been a while. He talked me into upgrading the shocks from the Rough Country to the Pro Comp kit, and I also got some extras like the steering stabilizer and an adjustable front track bar. Later on down the road, I ended up getting these front sway bar quick disconnects from JKS, and the rear sway bar, I took it off and I put it in the recycle bin. So when I disconnect the front sway bar and I air down the tires to like 14 PSI, any road becomes very, very smooth. After I lifted the Jeep, Elizabeth had a really hard time getting in here because she's like 5 foot nothing. So I installed these handles to help her get in. The front bumper is from Hanson Off-Road, and I don't remember if it's made from 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch steel, but it is very beefy. I ordered it directly from them in like 2014, and it took about 9 months for it to show up with no explanation. I was in contact with the company a few times, and it was really hard to get anybody to tell me what was going on. After about 6 or 7 months, they contacted me and said my bumper had been damaged and I was gonna have to wait even longer. I really wanted this bumper, so I said, fine, just do it, I'll wait. I was driving around with no front bumper for a while, but that was okay. It finally came one day and I had a friend help me install it, and then we also put this winch on it that I got. It's a Smitty built 9,500 pound winch, and I have used it a few times. It does work. Granted, I haven't gotten the Jeep really stuck, but this thing has gotten me out of some bad situations, and it's also been handy for moving trees out of the road when we're out in the middle of nowhere. We actually might use it more for that. I bought this fair lead separately, and for some reason I didn't realize that you could buy a bracket to bolt it onto the Jeep, so I had somebody I went to school with make it for me. But it turned out really beefy and nice, and I painted it red, so there we go. These KC lights are terrible, I hate them. They are KC daylighters, I believe. Does it say on here? No. It says made in USA, but these things suck. They're really terrible. They're kind of like spotlights. They're not what I wanted, and they're still on here because I haven't replaced them. And that's the end of that story. It's really nice having these big old shackles on here too. I put the biggest ones on here that I could. They're on backwards. But they're handy for all kinds of things like pulling people out of the ditch, pulling yourself out of a ditch. You can hook your winch to it through a snatch block and get more leverage, and they look cool. The rear bumper is from Protofab. It costs about as much as the front bumper, and I think the model is called the Safari with the spare tire holder. Anyway, I love this thing. It's one of my favorite mods to the Jeep. It could use a fresh coat of paint, but I just really like the way it looks. It's also very strong, practical, and useful. When I bought it, they had a photo on their webpage of a forklift lifting up the back end of the Jeep by the spare tire. I also put this tow hook on to make it easier to hook up a tow strap real quick. I got this little lock to secure it. You could probably cut it off with some scissors, but it's better than nothing. And I got the trailer connector on there because I had to tow a trailer once. Now this might be a little controversial, but being a poor college student, I put some retreaded tires on here. They're made by Treadrite. They're the Treadrite Warden all-terrain tires, and the size is 265/75/16. And as you can see, I put them on these lovely OEM snowflake wheels. I actually really like these wheels. When I bought the Jeep, it actually had different wheels on it, but the seller threw these ones in too because he was such a nice guy, and I liked these ones way more. I actually had to buy this 5th one because it only came with 4, and I definitely overpaid for it, but I've got 5 matching wheels. The tread pattern on these tires is kind of a ripoff of the BF Goodrich tires, but they've been really great, and I don't have any complaints. I've gotten a really surprising amount of traction at times, even driving on roads that are made of pure ice. These tires do have the little holes in them where you can put studs, but again, I was a poor college student and I didn't really need that. These tires are about 8 years old now, so they definitely need to be replaced again. But guess what? I'm broke again. And because I went with OEM wheels, I had to get wheel spacers to make the tires go flush with the edge of the Jeep. I had to get a spacer for the spare tire too because it was too close to this bar and it was putting a dent in my tire. I think these are 1-inch spacers, but I'll look it up and I'll put it on the screen. This cargo box was laying on the ground next to my friend's house for like a year. So I asked him if I could buy it from him, and he said, yeah, 20 bucks. I said deal, and I got some U-bolts and hooked it up to the factory luggage rack up here. It also came with one bar, but I used that for my light bar. Looking back, this might not have been the best idea because I screwed this thing directly into the roof, but I used RTV sealant when I did it, and it hasn't really been leaking, I don't think. Well, I do have a water leak, but I think it's coming in through the back, through the hatch, pretty sure. I don't think that's leaking, but it could be. I got the light bar on eBay, and as much as some people might hate them, it works really well. I don't really do campgrounds, so we usually go way out in the forest and find our own spot. And at night, this is what you want, along with these side lights, and I have two on the back as well. I have the front light bar, the side lights, and the rear lights on 3 different switches, so we can have up to 360 degrees of light anytime we need it. It really comes in handy all the time. The Jeep came with one skid plate, the one protecting the transfer case, and when I found out it originally had 2 more skid plates, I bought those too. The rear skid plate covers the gas tank, and I painted it red because it looks cool. The front skid plate mainly protects the sway bar and not much else. And it's not on here right now because one of the bolts broke off and I have not been able to get the broken bolt out. I'd say that's a project for a future video, but I've already tried it. It's not coming out, so I'm not sure what I'm gonna do. I might just leave it the way it is. The original headlight housings were looking pretty bad after 15 years, so I replaced them in 2014 or 15 with these ones that I got from Amazon, but they're not perfect. This one's actually got a bunch of water inside of it. They looked like the closest thing to OEM lights, and I was hoping that replacing them would improve the light output, but it really did not. It wasn't long before I realized that my stock jack didn't fit under the Jeep anymore, so I ended up getting this high lift jack on Craigslist from a guy for like 20 bucks. It was kind of rusty and old looking, so I painted it red because it looks cool. Under here we also got the tire iron, obviously. We got some jumper cables if we need them, which we have used them. We've got a first aid kit, just in case. And we've got some toe straps, or not toe straps, these are tie downs. We got some tie downs here. And then underneath, there's something. Under there, there's a tow hitch with a ball adapter. That's what it is. On that side, we've got an umbrella and there's a speaker amp under there for the door speakers. And when you've done electrical modifications in a 20-year-old Jeep, it's a good idea to have a fire extinguisher on hand. This one costs a little bit more because it's all metal, but I didn't want a plastic fire extinguisher back here. By the time I got this Jeep, the factory stereo was pretty much done. The door speakers were falling apart and the head unit was also falling apart. So I did a bunch of research and I found the most affordable Alpine system I could find. The model on this one is CDE154BT. It's got Bluetooth, which is a nice feature I actually never had in a car before. And it's got this external microphone just for making phone calls. I also got the adapter for it, so the buttons on the back of the steering wheel still control the stereo. But that was a real pain in the butt to install. The instructions were so complicated, I actually had to get help from a friend who's an electrical engineer. Shout out to Royce. Another part of the reason I decided to upgrade the stereo is that my brother gave me this old subwoofer and amp that he had. The amp is really underpowered and I've been meaning to replace it for a long time, but I built this crappy box for it out of particle board and it actually worked pretty good. After just a few months, the foam ring on the subwoofer started to tear, I think because it was so old. So I found a video on YouTube that showed me how to repair it myself, and I bought a kit on Amazon, and it really wasn't that hard, just took a lot of time. I also found this square grill on Amazon. It was really hard to find one that was the right size. I did buy a cargo cover that's supposed to cover all this stuff up so you can't see it, but I don't have it installed because it's supposed to hook onto the hatch panel, and I don't have a hatch panel anymore. The one that was on here when I bought the Jeep was all broken, all the clips were broken, it was held on with deck screws, and I had to remove it anyway because I couldn't get the hatch open. So I ended up throwing it away, and maybe someday I'll get another one, but for now there's no hatch panel, and so I can't use my cargo cover. Elizabeth got me this dash cam just in case, and it works really well. I haven't had to use it for anything important, but I've tested it out, and the video quality is pretty good. It has a rear camera too, and it plugs into my cigarette lighter down here, so it turns on automatically anytime I'd start the Jeep. Here's the rear camera. So one day I decided I was going to upgrade all the battery cables because I've been doing a lot of modifications in this Jeep, and I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to start a fire or have any issues with bad grounds or anything like that. So I ordered everything I needed, and I started tearing stuff apart. and that's when I found this. One of the previous owners put this masterpiece together, and I drove it this way for like 5 or 6 years before I found it. I mean, I'm actually impressed that it worked, but come on, it's not that hard to fix it the right way. So anyway, I went in and tore everything out. I replaced the battery terminals, the battery cables. There's 2 different sizes. I've got 2 gauge and 4 gauge in here. I'll put a diagram on screen of exactly what I did so you can see. I put wire loom around it so you can't even see the wires, but they're in there. No, I gotta start over, huh? I gotta start over. My battery's almost dead too. Here, let's just end this. I haven't even thought about what I was gonna say.